If we're being honest, I'm sure many of us have experienced this, but I'd imagine very few of us have actually sat down and examined why. After all, these characters are objectively just voice lines and pixels on a screen, so it's a bit strange if you think about it literally, no? So, why do we fall in love with fictional characters? There are some fascinating psychological and neuroscientific concepts that explain exactly why this happens, and it actually has almost nothing to do with being lonely or weird, and almost everything to do with being deeply, fundamentally human. If you stick around, you'll learn things that will help you along on your life journey, so please allow me to elucidate the answer to today's question. Without further ado, let's get into today's agenda. So I think the best place to start is with a concept called parasocial relationships. This term was coined by psychologists Donald Horton and Richard Wohl all the way back in 1956, and it describes the phenomenon of forming a one-sided emotional connection with a media figure. Originally, this was studied in the context of television and radio, with people developing a sense of intimacy with talk show hosts or news anchors that they've never actually met. But the concept has evolved significantly since then as human communication avenues have evolved, and modern research has of course expanded it well beyond TV personalities. In 2018, researchers at the University of York conducted a study that found players who engaged in RPGs with companion systems developed parasocial bonds that were, from a neurological standpoint, strikingly similar to early-stage real-world friendships. In other words, your brain is not making a clean distinction between the bond you have with, say, Garrus from Mass Effect and the bond you have with a new friend you met a few months ago. Essentially, the emotional circuitry is overlapping. While you might find that incredulous, the fact of the matter is that is just how the brain works. You see, humans evolved to form social bonds based on behavioral cues, not necessarily physical proximity or mutual awareness. If someone or something talks to you, remembers things about you, expresses concern for your well-being, supports your decisions, and shares vulnerable moments with you, your brain categorizes that entity as socially significant. The brain doesn't first run a background check to confirm if the other party is a sentient being. It responds to the aforementioned pattern, and RPG companions tend to hit almost every single trigger in the pattern. But parasocial relationships alone don't explain why we romance these characters. Another component to our feelings in this situation is something called attachment theory. Attachment theory was originally developed by psychologist John Bowlby in the late 1950s and was later expanded by Mary Ainsworth across the next few decades. In the most simple sense, attachment theory proposes that humans are biologically wired to form deep emotional bonds and that the style in which we form these bonds is largely shaped by our earliest experiences. You've probably heard people talk about attachment styles, right? Like secure or anxious or avoidant or disorganized attachment styles. This is where all of that comes from. Here's where it gets interesting in the context of NPC romance, though. Research published in the journal Computers and Human Behavior in 2020 found that players with anxious attachment styles were significantly more likely to pursue and emotionally invest in NPC romances. And the explanation makes a lot of sense when you think about it, right? NPC romance provides something that real-world romance often can't, and that is a controlled and emotional environment. The NPC will never ghost you, they will never suddenly lose interest, they will never cheat on you or gaslight you or tell you that you're too much. Well, depending on the game, they might cheat on you. The relationship operates within a framework where vulnerability is always rewarded and never punished. For a hypothetical someone whose real-world attachment experiences have taught them that vulnerability is risky, that is incredibly appealing. So it's less about replacing real relationships and more about experiencing what secure attachment feels like, sometimes for the first time. And I think there's some value in this, right? If you think about it, video games are one of the only mediums where you don't just observe a love story, you participate in it. You make the choices, you decide to be vulnerable, you experience reciprocation, and for some people, that experience of choosing to be emotionally open and having it go well, that can genuinely be a formative experience. I don't think we should dismiss that as a genuinely valuable experience solely due to the specific context it takes place. I think people can learn about themselves and just how to exist more healthfully and symbiotically with others by experiencing quality video game romances. I want to go deeper here though, because there's a neuroscientific layer to this that I find absolutely fascinating. It has to do with something called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons were discovered by Italian neuroscientist Giacomo Rizzolatti in the early 1990s, and they are neurons in the brain that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing the same action. They're essentially the neural basis for empathy. In the context of NPC romance, mirror neurons are part of the reason why watching a character express affection towards you, even a fictional character, creates a genuine emotional response. When an NPC vests faith or adoration in you, your mirror neurons don't care that they're not real. They fire. Your brain simulates the experience of receiving that affection. And when you combine that with a psychological phenomenon called experience taking, the effect is amplified to a degree that explicates why game relationships feel the way that they do. By the way, the aforementioned term experience taking was defined by psychologists Jeff Kaufman and Lisa Libby in a 2012 study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. It describes a process by which a person spontaneously assumes the identity, goals, thoughts, and emotions of a character. Now, you might hear that and think it sounds similar to immersion, but it's actually a distinct and more specific phenomenon. Immersion is more about being absorbed into the story world, right? Experience taking is about immersion with the character themselves, so your protagonist or your self-insert. And this is another key to understanding why NPC romances feel so personal. Through experience taking, you have psychologically merged with the protagonist. Their romantic choices feel like your romantic choices. Their emotional responses feel like your emotional responses. The romance feels like something you're living, because cognitively speaking, in that moment, you basically are living it. Experience taking was found to be so powerful that it actually shifts a person's real-world attitudes and behaviors after the story ends. In other words, the emotional experience stays with you long after you put the controller down, and when that experience is a romantic one, I mean, when you've spent dozens of hours building a bond with the character, it makes a whole lot of sense that it would feel real, because at a cognitive level, your brain processed it as real. Now, there's another layer to this that I think is worth discussing, and it has to do with why NPC romances sometimes feel more intense than real relationships. The psychological concept here is called idealization, and it's been studied extensively in the context of romantic attachment. Idealization is the tendency to perceive a romantic partner as closer to one's ideal than they objectively are. In real life, idealization is a natural phase of early romance. In fact, it is commonly coined as the honeymoon phase, which you've probably heard of. This phase fades as you get to know a person's complexities, contradictions, and flaws. But here's the thing with NPC romances. The honeymoon phase in many cases never ends. Even when you get to know the character in their totality, there's a hard ceiling or cap on how many experiences you can actually have with them. And so you basically never progress to the point where you experience enough together that your idealization of them begins to fade in a meaningful way. An example for my more shallow-minded folk is the fact that these characters never age and they always appear as they are at the moment your infatuation sparked. Think of that as a metaphor for the package of mental social experiences that you have with these NPCs. I do want to be very clear here though and state that I personally think it's important to recognize that part of what makes real human connection so powerful is the fact that it survives the death of idealization. When you love somebody and truly know them beyond the curated version of them, you know, the whole messy, complicated, contradictory person, that's when love becomes something extraordinary, and no NPC can really give you that, but that doesn't mean what they do give you is worthless. In fact, I think of it as a valuable experience that you can use to learn about yourself and what your wants and desires are in a partner IRL. Think about who you gravitate towards in these games. Is it the confident leader, the quiet intellectual, the wounded soul with walls up, the gentle healer who sees the best in everyone? Your choices in these fictional scenarios are actually reflections of your real values, desires, and sometimes even your unmet needs. In a way, who you romance in an RPG is a mirror. And mirrors, when used thoughtfully, are powerful tools for self-understanding. So, assuming you're in the moderation zone and not negatively overhauling your life, don't feel weird or embarrassed about your emotional investment in fictional characters. Science signifies that your capability to form these bonds is a sign that your empathic systems are working as intended. Your brain is doing exactly what millions of years of evolution designed it to do, which is again, to form bonds with entities that demonstrate social and emotional significance. Now, I want to pause and recap here because I know that we've covered a lot. So we started with parasocial relationships, which explain why we form one-sided emotional bonds with media figures in the first place, and then followed up with a study that showed that bonds with RPG companions look neurologically similar to early real-world friendships. Attachment theory allowed us to understand what that same study meant when it referenced that people of the anxious attachment archetype were more frequently drawn to NPC romance, since these relationships offered the one thing real romance often can't guarantee, that being a space where vulnerability is always rewarded. Mirror neurons are what make that affection register as real to your brain in the first place, firing whether you're experiencing something yourself or just watching it happen to someone else. Experience taking pushes that even further by having you psychologically merge with the character so their romantic wins and losses feel like your own. And idealization is what locks the whole thing in place, making it so the honeymoon phase never gets the chance to fade the way it inevitably does with real people. With all that covered, if I could leave you with anything, it would be this. Don't feel weird about the fact that a fictional character made you feel something real. Instead, examine what they made you feel and why. Maybe you were drawn to a character because of their unwavering loyalty, and that tells you something about what you need from the people in your life. Maybe you were drawn to a character who had the courage to be vulnerable, and that tells you something about the walls you've built up in your own relationships. Video games are one of the most potent mirrors for self-reflection that exist in modern media, and the characters that we choose to love within them are no exception. So that basically sums up why we romance NPCs and why it's not a bad thing. At our core, we are social creatures who are wired to connect, and when a story is well crafted enough to trigger that wiring, it just doesn't matter that the stimulus is fictional. And what we can learn about ourselves through that experience is extremely valuable.
And you said you loved me. This may not be the best time to say it, but I love you too, with all my heart. After this, no. Nothing could make me feel safer than to be loved by you.
Thank you so much for spending time with me today. It's an absolute honor to be able to create videos for you all. If you're enjoying the discussions in the comments or the videos themselves, definitely subscribe. We'd be honored to have you join us here. There are links in my description to cool stuff, including a way to join the channel's Discord, where I am always present if you ever want to chat. Check out the other videos on my channel for more content like this, and have a great day, night, or morning, and remember to be kind and thoughtful. Peace.